Welcome to episode 3 of Thought Mining Podcast. I'm Derek Olson and my esteemed co-host, Dr. Nathan Anderson, and we're here to expand our horizons and discover new truths that are just lurking beneath the surface. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again. Welcome to you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, last time when we left off, we were talking a little bit about getting into an inadvertent thought mining exercise that I had engaged in on my walk back to my office after episode 1.
Yeah. And I hope that our viewers will also get caught in accidental, unplanned thought mining as well after, listening to your description. And
yeah, I'll jump into it here in a sec. I feel like I always have to read something at the beginning, like I talked in the last episode a little bit about how this is sort of beyond the scope of my comfort zone, just kind of getting in free-flowing conversation and not really knowing where it's going to lead. So I always feel like I have to have a starting point that's somewhat structured. And
well, I like it though. It's a good template for us, I think. Maybe one of these days I'll write something and read it. I'm trying to think of things I wrote recently because I'm very, not to change the subject, but I'm very, with my writing, a lot of times I use it as a way to try to free form for creativity. And I think sometimes it's funny when you recognize that you've gone up a creative avenue that maybe doesn't have any creative potential, and it's just funny in general, but also really stupid. And so I had the one the other day, and I don't know why. So I was watching this video, and it was on Twitter or something, and it was this guy, and he's stealing all these iPhones, right? He's putting them in his pockets, and then he runs away, and people are like, "Oh man, this is terrible. He's stealing all these iPhones," and it's like he got $40,000 worth of iPhones. But if you think about Apple, it's worth $1 trillion, this company, and it's just thinking about what a small amount of money. $40,000. Now I get it's the principle, I get it, you know what I mean? But at the same time, what is $1 trillion? It's $1 bills stacked on top of each other all the way to the moon, and back again. And this guy's got 10 iPhones or whatever, and everybody's sort of moralizing about it, And I got in there and started to be, my witty whatever self, and I was just like, oh, this guy's stealing iPhones. He's single-handedly putting Apple out of business. He's like the opposite of Steve Jobs. And that is the dumbest joke ever. And then I was thinking about the opposite of Steve Jobs, and I'm trying to create this character in my mind, and it's what would he be called? He's the anti-Jobs. So he's kind of like the Antichrist a little bit, but he's the anti-Jobs. And it's what would the anti-Jobs be? Mm-hmm. And it's well, he's really against innovation. He wants to keep things the way they are. And I don't know, I was just going down this dumb thought mining process with the anti-Jobs. And then at some point I realized that this idea is a turd, right? This is just a dumb idea. And I'm never going to do anything with it. But I'm going to bring it to this podcast, I guess. And actually that was its creative potential. I think it just lived up to its peak performance as a creative idea.
I don't know. I'm kind of hooked on it.
The anti-Jobs. Yeah, maybe I'll write a whole movie about him, It's someone who just hates Steve Jobs so much that they become his exact opposite shadow self, right? So it's maybe it grows a dark goatee, Although Steve Jobs might have had a goatee, but I can't remember. But, he'll have long hair, but Steve Jobs had short hair. And, he wears black all the time. Well, no, he wears a white turtleneck. Anyway, so I digress. So let's get back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, I'll get back to it, but I do want to know more about that. I want to see your vision to come to life.
Okay.
I am very intrigued by it and excited.
Maybe I'll try to draw a picture of him, and I'll just show him on the... Well, if I get motivated, I'll draw a picture of him, and I'll insert it into the edit of this podcast. So, when we're talking in this moment, I'll show my, graphic image of the anti-Jobs.
Yeah, and then keep going with the description of the characteristics and
right.
Kind of what he represents. I want to know.
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by it. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thought mine that a bit.
Yeah.
Bring back the full story.
It needs a little more work. A little more work.
This is the start.
Yeah, it's the seed that you plant that becomes a beautiful tree.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get back to. I was gonna read first I was going to read like the last part of the first reflection. So episode 1, we introduced thought mining and just read a little bit of this initial reflection about the concept. Second episode talked a little bit about the middle of that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the third part of that first reflection. And then I'm going to lead into the inadvertent thought mining process. Oh, okay. Man, you know what? I'm kind of bummed out because we were gonna start a timer at the beginning of this one.
Oh, yeah, so the gong can go off. Well, I think we've been talking for about 5 minutes, so let's set it for 25 and we'll go.
25? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me do that. Sorry for the...
Yeah, it's okay. And just for context for the audience, we felt we get so deep in conversation that we're disoriented in how much time that we've spent, but we're hoping to make these episodes a tight 30-minute window. So just like your half-hour favorite television show. But, I think we went 37 or 38 minutes the first time, and we don't really know how long we went the second time. And now this is episode 3.
Yeah, try to keep it around. Yeah, we'll try to keep it around 30. There'll be a bell that will go off to...
Is it going off right now? That's just still kind of like going.
It's just like, it just carries on for a while.
Have you ever did a sound bath? Do you know what that is?
I know what they are, but I've never done one.
I don't think I've done one either. I'm really interested in the subject, though. I think I've seen it offered at like yoga studios, and basically you just sit there and someone like hits a little ding.
Yeah.
Ding, and you just spend like an hour just meditating, which, meditating with other people is probably, I wonder how that differs from meditating by yourself,
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, there are definitely, I would imagine, benefits to both. I mean,
right.
Experiences with both, and I've found them both to be worthwhile, both to be difficult at the same time.
Right, in different ways. So like maybe like if you're meditating by yourself, you are being pulled away by like, oh, I gotta go answer this email, or I gotta, you start thinking about, I forgot to fold the laundry or whatever, these kind of things will be your sort of impediments. But if you're meditating with other people, you might be like, oh, I hope I don't smell bad, or when I showed up, I said, good morning, but it's actually afternoon, or, whatever it is, like kind of social thoughts that could be your wall instead of organizational thoughts, or, things related to tasks or incomplete things.
Yeah. There's something about the energy with other people around who are in a meditative state or practicing.
Do you think you could catch one of their thoughts? I mean, like, it's hard because, we get into quantum physics or whatever we want to get into. I think a lot of us really don't understand. I mean, nobody understands the real nature of reality, I think, in my opinion. The nature of reality is, I think, always going to be outside of the human being's grasp. And the more that we learn, the deeper it'll get. So right now we're finding out about quantum physics like the last 100 years or whatever. Once we really get a grasp of that, we'll realize there's something beneath that too.
Right.
So anyways, I don't know what I was trying to convey there, but essentially that, is it possible that if we're sitting around thought mining in a group that maybe, this guy over here had a thought and I caught wind of it, and we might even be having the same thought, but we don't know, right? We don't know that we're having the same thought, but maybe we are. Maybe there's some kind of, magnetism happening where thoughts are aligning.
Yeah, there could be. Man, it's difficult to sort of grasp that, but I mean, I understand what you're suggesting and asking, but it's hard for me to like know whether something like that would actually be occurring. I mean, there's probably maybe science in the works that can help to
I mean,
study that.
Just thinking about how to study it, right? You'd have to, I guess, be like, I don't know, maybe if you did some kind of like Rorschach test on people afterwards or something, and then see if they had the same associations, or see if there was like, with first they meditate together and then you do these Rorschach tests, which is like an ink blot test. If some people don't refer to it as a Rorschach test, but you think about the famous ink blot test where they're like, oh, it's a coffee stain, but like I see a butterfly or whatever. But anyway, so like I wonder if, like, let's just say we have a control group and experiment group, and the control group does not meditate together, and then you give them ink blot test, and now you take the meditation group together and give them an ink blot test, and maybe like there'll be like more correlation in like, oh, everybody saw a butterfly, whereas over here, this guy saw a tree, this guy saw, his bills, this guy saw what, you know what I mean? Like, so who knows? And then maybe you could, maybe you could try to like introduce like Inception, like something like that. So it's like, I don't know, maybe you're sending, I don't know, like radio signals or Wi-Fi signals that are like pictures of trees or whatever, and just like see if anybody like, got a picture of a tree. I don't know. Is there any way to actually measure something so, seemingly mystical or magical?
Yeah. I don't know how to do it, but somebody who's smarter than me probably is working on it.
Maybe. Oh, can I go off on a quick thought that I had? I thought about how, and maybe someone's going to steal this, so it's one of these thoughts that's like, oh, this could be $1 million idea, but like I know I'm never going to have time to do it, so it's like, well, who cares if someone else does it at this point? But like, I think it was an idea I had one time about like a reality show where you put psychics to the test. So you take these people that like position themselves as psychics, and like sometimes they find kidnapped kids, or they can talk to your dead relatives, or they have all these different sort of special powers from their psychic abilities, and get like 10 of them, and then you'll have like, let's say, a parking lot full of cars, and in one of the trunks there's someone's tied up, right? And this is all set up like a reality show, and it's like which, like, they have to pick which car's got a person tied up in it just based on their feelings, their psychic abilities, and just like see who gets it and see who doesn't, and see if there's like, is it just random, or because maybe like one or two of the people really are just like nailing it somehow, and it's like, oh my God, like, does this person have special powers or what? Or is it all a scam? Who knows?
Right.
It's like put the psychics to the test.
I'd be intrigued. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be a hit show.
Yeah. Right. Well, something to work on.
Right. Yeah. So do you want to start with the reading? Or
should I do that? Yeah, no. We're going to start with it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I like starting with a reading every time. It always just gives us something to jump off of. It's a good platform.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is like the end of that, that first reflection. The concept of thought mining emerged through this process. That is the first sentence. It follows some description about thought mining and sort of how you engage or could engage in an internal thought mining process. Okay, now it follows. I woke up in the middle of the night and was unable to fall back asleep. My mind was racing with meandering thoughts. Eventually, I settled into a state of presence that was conducive to being an aware observer of the thoughts that I was thinking. The phrase, thought mining, emerged and captured my attention at a deeper level than the other thoughts that had been passing through my mind. I began to engage with the thought by pondering it further and jotting notes related to my interpretation of its meaning. The insights described in this brief reflection are the result of an internal thought mining process that was prompted by the phrase thought mining, which aimlessly passed through my mind at a moment when I was an aware observer of my thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like, are you still awake?
No, I mean, I think it's very interesting. I mean, it's become our podcast to an extent. Like this night you spent in your thoughts has become our podcast to an extent. And, I mean, it's a manifestation of it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like if that was, the seed, then this is the tree or whatever, right? So, yeah, I mean, like, firstly, it takes a certain amount of discipline and awareness, to see what to disconnect from the thoughts themselves, right? And to be able to independently observe the thoughts as things outside that are not you, right? It's not little bits of you, it's just little bits that your brain conjured up, and, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like going back to your shelf metaphor.
Oh, do you want to just repeat it? Just because now we're on episode 3, maybe some people forgot the shelf.
Yeah, episode 1 and 2, we talked about this empty shelf that Derek had beautifully brought up as a visual to think about like how to carry yourself throughout the day, and making sure that you have an empty shelf that allows you to allows space for new thoughts or new perceptions or contemplations to emerge. Oftentimes our minds are so cluttered with overflowing shelves of things that we don't really need at the moment, and making sure that there's an empty shelf can help ensure that you can take away some things out of the world that through your experiences that are valuable to you that you might not otherwise have access to if it was full. And so at that moment, in that evening when that thought sort of flowed through my mind, I feel like I must have had an empty shelf that allowed space for that to arise.
Right. And maybe that was something you were cultivating, not necessarily for that moment, but, maybe thinking about like when we did our meditation session prior to the podcast, and creating the empty shelf maybe sometimes does require you to be purposeful in your thought about creating that empty shelf, because, many of us will wake up in the morning and the first thing we'll do is like we'll check our email or something like that, and all of a sudden we'll see all the things that are required of us today, and then we'll start thinking around those things that are required, and how am I going to logistically complete this in this time frame, and where am I going to be at this time, and how am I going to make this work with that thing. And you get so deep into that process, and not that process isn't, necessary, it is, but when can you, I guess, and how can one apply the discipline to within that structure to say, even though all of these things are happening at once and I can barely wrap my head around them to an extent, I'm still going to be open-minded as I walk, say I'm going to walk to work today, or walk from my car to the office, or whatever, like whatever short period of time you have, when are you going to make the time to literally just let go of all of that planning, all of that thinking, and then also like understanding that you're not going to lose it just because you let go of it, because sometimes I think we want to tight grip onto things because it's a sense of control, right? And it's like, well, I let go, I'll never have control again. But in reality, we can probably let go and then just get it again, let go, get it again. You don't have to be so, trying to tightly control. But, I guess that would be associated with like a sense of potential loss if you did lose control of it. Like, so like say I was thinking about how I was going to organize this meeting that I'm having later at work, and I decided to watch a bird fly in the sky and thought about the meaning of life or something, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden I show up at the meeting, I'm completely unprepared, and everybody's like, oh my God, like this guy, who hired this guy, he's not even ready for this meeting. Out watching birds, silly guy.
That bird thought might come into play later on, though, for some other purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe
I had one of those that I'm going to have to bring up at some point in time, birds flying in the sky, and like jotting down a thought mining process occurred through that, and jotted down a thought, and then it just has lived in my journal since then. But maybe it's something to...
Well, that's actually true, because now I'm sitting here and I've already, let's say, minimized the value of this, watching the bird in the sky and the thoughts and that. And so I've been like, well, that's, I've implied, I think, that that's not responsible when you have a meeting coming up, or you could be perceived that way. But maybe also, though, right, by letting go of how you've planned this meeting to go, you can then be, because honestly, I think to best conduct the meeting, your best bet probably is going to be to listen and be aware and react. And, although you have a plan, you also have to be in the moment, so maybe that bird moment would help get you out of your head a little bit, because you can only organize things so much, because there's unpredictable variables you haven't quite faced yet. And so once those unpredictable variables get involved, how do you have to maintain the structure? And sometimes that's without flexibility, that's how things break, right? Because it needs to bend to not break. So yeah, maybe in that scenario, the watching that bird was not only, a nice little escape from the stress, but also a preparation technique for the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm envisioning the birds now that I had seen, and I'm not going to get through it now for sure, but thinking about you talked about like walking into the office. That kind of brings me back to that other inadvertent thought mining process that I went through after episode 1 on my way back to my office, and so I was kind of all jazzed up from our conversation. It's just always such a pleasure to visit with you, and like I always feel good, and
Same.
like it's I get some cool takeaways from our conversations, and I was on my way back to my office thinking about like, oh, what do I got to do the rest of the day, and the tasks that I have to work on, and without really thinking about it, but I still think being like primed in that thought mining sort of mindset. I was aware enough of a thought that popped into my head, which was related to thought mining, but it was if it could mean more than I perceive it to mean at the moment, I write it down. So as I'm sort of thinking about all of this other stuff going on, this thought that says, if it could mean more than I perceive it to mean at the moment, I write it down. Started like resonating with me. Something is sticking with that. I mean, it seems like, like when do I thought mine is kind of what it felt like. But I was like, I've gotten into the practice or the habit of writing stuff down, just like little sentences or phrases, and that stuck with me. So then when I got back to my office, I'm like, I need to write this out a little bit further
because it meant something.
Yeah. And so this is what I wrote when I got back. I don't know if I've read it since, but it's just essentially an elaboration on that phrase. When a seemingly sporadic thought enters my mind and I feel a strong enough sense that it could mean more than I perceive it to mean at the moment, I lean toward jotting it down so it is available if an opportunity arises for it to be contemplated further. I wasn't looking for it, but I noticed it and was receptive to it, and it resonated with me, so I wrote it down. It feels like it's a small fragment of something larger that will be ready to be placed in a specific space when its destined location presents itself. Maybe it will transpire into an expanded or different purpose at some point in the future. Maybe it won't.
Wow. So that to me, it strikes me as like, it's very wise and disciplined to an extent, right? So what I like about it is you're saying, if I think it's going to mean something more to me, then maybe you are capable of like really grasping in the moment, but you just have an instinct that there's something there that you're thinking, well, let me get a hold of this thing and I'll put it in my pocket, and if I have time, I'll reevaluate what spoke to me about this idea. But what I didn't hear was, if I feel like this idea was, optimizing my ability to make money and be successful on the internet, or, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of, I think, what I've been really frustrated with in general in terms of like media that I search out is like everything's about what's the exact best optimal way to do everything in your life. And I just think that by trying to optimize everything, you just really lose sight of what's important. And you're like, well, I want to get the maximum ROI on this and the minimum effort and the 80-20 rule and this and that and the other thing. And we're always trying to find hacks and tips and tricks on how to like make things less onerous and more profitable. And I didn't hear any of that within what you were saying. You know what I mean? In terms of like value judgments being placed. And I think that that's what is important about it and can help you to be more creative in this scenario, because you're open to the idea that it could mean more to you than you initially discovered or than on initial inspection. And so that's what I like about it. I mean, it's really about searching and not with a objective in mind, and the objective being more success or more people liking me or more this or more that, you know what I mean? Some kind of like ego feedback or whatever. It's about the search. It's not about what you found or what you're finding. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah, totally does. And yeah, I mean, I can't, it never really feels like money is the objective when it comes to something like
Smash that like button,
yeah, right,
and subscribe.
if it's a natural consequence of it, I mean, that's cool. But if it's, if it's the intended outcome, it's hard to sort of to get behind that, for me anyways, for certain projects like this. Like if I'm, if the intent is to start a business and to make money and keep it alive and generate revenue through it, that, I mean, of course, like money has to be sort of an objective of it so that you can stay alive. And if you're doing something that really matters,
Right.
you really believe in it, you need money so that you can distribute it out to the audiences that could benefit from it. If you don't have money, the likelihood of being able to distribute to as broadly might be lower. But, for something like this project right now that's in the works, I mean, the value is really just like how it feels, like how it makes me feel.
This reminds me really of two things that I saw recently that completely kind of contradict each other and to an extent. And this is, I think, what we're wrestling with a little bit too is, so one of them was something that Rick Rubin said, actually. And Rick Rubin was saying, don't put all your eggs in your artist basket to an extent, meaning like if you, like, say, don't succeed in your rap career, you don't want that to be the result is you go hungry and you can't feed your kids and this and that and the other thing. You don't want to put yourself in that position of desperation, because in his feelings, if you put yourself in that where your art has to, like, you literally, this song isn't a hit, I'm done for type thing, I'm out on the street. If you put yourself in that kind of desperation, it's going to put your art in that desperation too, and that's going to be noticeable to the audience in terms of like, yeah, you're just like a desperate artist trying to tick all these boxes so you get success and da-da-da-da, and you're just too hungry for the reward of it. You're not really just expressing yourself. Now, the other contradictory statement I heard from another sort of influencer was called "burn the boats," and the guy's like, "Burn all the boats." It's like, make sure that you can't go back.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess another word would be like burn your bridges type thing. Because once you've crossed the Nile or whatever, crossed the Ganges or crossed the Rio Grande, no looking back. Because if you start to think about your plan B, then that's your downfall. Because if you think, I can sink into this plan B, well, you're going to end up gravitating toward that more often than not. So there's these two contradictory views, and maybe they're both right and they're both wrong a little bit. I tend to go probably from life experience toward Rick Rubin's analysis, because I just think that ultimately, it's quit your job and focus on your art is a great idea when you already have an art income, but not a great idea if your income is, like, let's say, spotty or not something you can rely on, because you don't want to be creating from a sense of desperation either. You want to be creating from, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization comes when you have food on the table, when you have a roof over your head, when you have companionship of loved ones, when you have all of these things in place, then you can you have the sort of like privilege to, thought mine or self-actualize or like be in the, you know what I mean? But if you're in a place of need, that is going to always be, influencing and pulling at you. So I don't know if I've come up with anything useful from that. But.
Well, they both sound right. As you were explaining the one, I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And then you were explaining the other one, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
That's how I felt too. Yeah, it's like, oh wait, I should do this. No, actually, I should do the opposite of this. And it's like, well, which one is right? Both of them. What?
There's got to be some sort of balance in there at some
right.
point in time.
Yeah,
I've never really had the confidence to just jump ship and go all in on something, because I feel like I have these other financial obligations that I have to meet, and I need some sort of a consistent income to make sure that I meet those.
And that might also grant you, let's say, the stability mentally, because you know that you have those things that you have to do. So like that part you don't have to think about, because I always think about this phrase that my grandfather, I think, coined or whatever. And so he was a World War II veteran. And one time someone asked him, I know.
You couldn't finish that.
Okay, we'll finish this one. One time someone asked him, they said, well, like, how did you like being a soldier in the war? Or some similar question. And he said, I loved it. It was the best time of my life. And it was like such a unexpected answer. And the way he described it was like, when you're in the Army, you don't have to think. And so like he was a farmer, and you know, when you're a farmer, you have to be very self-directed, and you have to think about all of these potential outcomes. And if I do this, then that could happen. And I mean, just imagine the level of stress, like operating a bigger operation where some of it's in your control and some of it's in the hands of God, you know? So, and some of it's in the hands of the market, and some of it's just nothing you can do. All you can do is what you can do, but then your job is half what you can do and half gambling to an extent, right? And I think he nostalgically looked back on his time in the Army because it was like, wake up now, put on your backpack, march to this location, da-da-da-da-da. And it was just kind of like, okay, you know, I can do this. I can follow these instructions, and I don't have to be stressed out because everything is clear. Even though I could get shot and killed at any moment, and, you know, I may not ever see my home again, just having these burdens of, I don't know, unnecessary complication or whatever lifted from you, to him was such a relief that he looked back on it nostalgically in his later years.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Hearing that perspective it makes a lot of sense. Like, to me, not having to make decisions about certain things can be liberating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we could go into more examples of that, but I think our time has expired for this episode. What a quick one.
It went fast. Holy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to wrap it up?
I guess so. Yeah. So in summary and summation, you know, let's see. I mean, what did we talk about? I mean, I feel like I told a couple weird stories.
Yeah. And then I was gonna lead into or use sort of like the thought. You know, we're kind of starting these episodes with like a written thought that has been resonating, and then we kind of use that as sort of a launch pad for the discussion. I think we did talk about some things before that for a little bit of a time, and
right.
Then we ended up talking about the last part of the first reflection on thought mining, which is where the concept sort of surfaced out of nowhere in the middle of the night, or seemingly nowhere in the middle of the night. And then I wrote down a thought that had entered my mind on the way back to my office after episode 1, and then thought mined that a little bit when I got back to my office and read that reflection, and just to sort of demonstrate that this stuff sort of can happen at unexpected times, and to be receptive to it and engage with it can be a rewarding experience. Help make meaning out of some of the ambiguous things that are passing through your awareness.
Right.
And yeah, then we sort of led into more discussion. You talked about your grandfather and his experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Rest in peace, Grandpa.
Yes.
Hero. Read us.
Yes. Hero. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Well, thanks for joining us for episode 3 of the Thought Mining Podcast. We'll have plenty of more intriguing and surprising conversation in the future. If you just smash that like button and hit the subscribe, teach the algorithm, you know, that we're worth watching, I guess. And thanks again for tuning in. Thank you, Nathan, for, you know, being my counterpart in this adventure.
Thank you, Derek. It's a real pleasure.
All right. And signing off.
All right.